Chen stood before her dorm room mirror adjusting the golden tassel on her mortarboard for the third time. The navy blue graduation gown hung perfectly on her small frame. The valedictorian cord draped across her shoulders like a badge of honor she'd earned through 4 years of relentless dedication. Her speech notes lay on the desk behind her, memorized but still marked with nervous annotations in her precise handwriting. "Today's the day," she whispered to her reflection, trying to summon the excitement she'd imagined feeling on this morning for years. The room felt hollow despite being packed with boxes, a stark reminder that while her classmates had families helping them move out, Maya had been handling everything alone as usual. Her parents, Richard and Linda Chen, had built a real estate empire from nothing, and Maya had grown up hearing about their latest developments, their networking events, their crucial business meetings. Success was the family currency, and Maya had been paying in full since middle school. She'd graduated summa cum laude from one of the most competitive engineering programs in the country. The dean had personally called to congratulate her on achieving the highest GPA in the program's history. Maya had rushed to call her parents, breathless with excitement, only to reach their voicemail. They'd called back 3 days later between meetings with a distracted, "That's great, honey. We're so proud." The pattern had been set years ago. Maya's junior year, when she'd won the prestigious Hawkins Scholarship, a full ride plus research stipend. Her parents had missed the award ceremony because of a make-or-break property showing. When she'd been selected for the competitive NASA internship, they'd been in Cabo celebrating a successful quarter. Each milestone had come with the same promise: "We'll make it up to you at graduation." "That's the big one." Maya's phone buzzed on the dresser. Her heart lifted. Maybe they were calling to wish her luck, or to say they were running early and would grab breakfast with her before the ceremony. The family she'd observed over the years always seemed to have those traditions, those small moments that made the big ones more meaningful. Instead, a text message lit up her screen. "Sorry, honey, big deal closing today. Too busy to make it. Congrats, Mom and Dad." Maya stared at the words, reading them twice, then 3 times. The casual tone, the abbreviated message, the assumption that congrats would somehow substitute for their physical presence. She felt something cold settle in her chest, a familiar weight she'd carried for years, suddenly becoming unbearable. Almost mechanically, she opened Instagram, a habit she'd developed for staying connected with her family's life from a distance. The first post on her feed made her breath catch. Her mother's account posted 20 minutes ago, a photo of 17-year-old Danny in his baseball uniform, mid-swing, with the caption, "So proud of our MVP. Nothing beats watching Danny play. Proud mom, baseball life." Maya's hands trembled as she scrolled through the comments. Her relatives, family, friends, all celebrating Danny's regular season game while she stood alone in her graduation gown. The location tag confirmed what she already knew: Riverside High School baseball field, 15 minutes from campus. The truth crystallized with painful clarity. This wasn't about a business deal. This wasn't about being too busy. Her parents had made a choice, and once again, Maya hadn't been the priority. She thought about Danny, her golden boy brother who'd never earned a grade above B+, but had their parents' unwavering devotion. Danny, who'd been handed a car at 16, while Maya had worked 2 jobs to buy her own. Danny, whose mediocre baseball skills were celebrated like professional achievements while Maya's academic excellence was simply expected. The invisible dog, the one who succeeded quietly, without fanfare, without needing the emotional support that was lavished on her brother. Maya had been playing this role for so long she'd almost convinced herself it was normal. But standing there in her graduation gown, clutching her valedictorian speech about perseverance and family support, Maya finally understood the truth. She'd been seeking validation from parents who saw her achievements not as extraordinary but as inevitable. She was the child who didn't need them, so they'd stopped trying to be needed. The ceremony would begin in 30 minutes. Maya looked at her reflection one more time, seeing not the accomplished young woman she'd become, but the overlooked daughter she'd always been. The weight of 4 years of promise and disappointment settled on her shoulders, heavier than any graduation gown could ever be. Maya sank onto her narrow dorm bed, the graduation gown pooling around her like dark water. The phone felt heavy in her hands as she stared at the Instagram post, but her mind was traveling backward, connecting dots she'd spent years deliberately ignoring. She remembered being 12, staying up until midnight to finish a science fair project that would eventually win state competition. Her parents had promised to help, but a critical client dinner had run long. Maya had presented her project on renewable energy solutions to an empty auditorium seat where they should have been sitting. The judges had been impressed. Her parents had been impressed too, when they'd seen the trophy 3 days later, sitting on the kitchen counter like evidence of her self-sufficiency. Maya doesn't need our help, her mother had told relatives at family gatherings, voice filled with pride that Maya had misinterpreted for years. She's so independent, so capable. Danny, on the other hand, and then would come the litany of Danny's needs, his struggles, his requirement for constant encouragement and support. Maya had worn that independence like armor, convincing herself that being needed less meant she was stronger. But sitting here now, she recognized the truth that had been hiding beneath her achievements. She hadn't been raised to be independent. She'd been raised to be invisible. The pattern was everywhere, once she started looking. Christmas mornings where Danny's pile of presents dwarfed hers, explained away with Maya's so practical, she doesn't need much. Parent-teacher conferences they'd attended religiously for Danny's mediocre grades, while skipping hers entirely because Maya's always been fine on her own. The family vacation photos where she'd been the designated photographer, present but somehow absent from the memories being made. She pulled up her phone's photo album, scrolling through 4 years of college achievement. There she was at the scholarship banquet, smiling alone at a table full of families. At the engineering honors ceremony, holding her award next to empty chairs. At the NASA internship celebration, surrounded by other interns and their proud parents while she stood on the periphery, taking pictures for everyone else. Danny's phone, meanwhile, was probably full of family photos. Danny at baseball games with their parents cheering in the stands. Danny at family dinners where the conversation revolved around his interests, his friends, his future plans to join the family business. Danny, who had never needed to earn their attention because it had always been freely given. Maya thought about the conversations she'd had with her parents about her future. Brief, efficient exchanges where they'd nod approvingly at her plans while offering no input, no guidance, no emotional investment. When she'd struggled with imposter syndrome during her junior year, calling home in tears after a particularly brutal engineering project, her mother had said, "You'll figure it out, Maya. You always do." Not comfort, not support, just the expectation that she would handle it alone, as always. The cruelest part was how she'd internalized their narrative. She'd become proud of needing nothing from them, of being the low-maintenance daughter who solved her own problems and celebrated her own victory. She'd convinced herself that this made her stronger, more mature, more worthy of respect. But respect, she realized now, was just the consolation prize they'd given her instead of love. Maya looked at her valedictorian speech, pages of carefully crafted words about perseverance, family support, and gratitude. She'd written a paragraph thanking her parents for teaching her independence and believing in her ability to succeed. The words felt like lies now, or maybe like the desperate attempts of a daughter still trying to reframe neglect as a gift. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate, "Break a leg today. Your parents must be so excited to see you speak." Maya stared at the message, feeling the weight of years of pretending, years of making excuses for empty chairs and missed moments. She'd become an expert at explaining away her parents' absence, at protecting their reputation even when it meant diminishing her own pain. But today, something had shifted. Maybe it was the finality of graduation, or maybe it was seeing other families' joy contrasted with her own solitude. Or maybe it was simply that she'd run out of ways to rationalize being treated like an afterthought by the people who were supposed to love her most. Maya stood up slowly, her graduation gown rustling in the quiet room. She had a choice to make: walk across that stage, deliver her speech to parents who couldn't be bothered to show up, and continue the pattern of invisible achievement, or finally stop pretending that their indifference was acceptable. For the first time in years, Maya felt something other than the familiar ache of disappointment. She felt angry. And for the first time in her life, she felt like that anger might actually be justified. Maya looked at her watch. 15 minutes until the processional began. Around campus, she could hear the distant sounds of families gathering, cars parking, the excited chatter of people who had somewhere to be and someone to celebrate. She had spent 4 years imagining this moment, and now that it was here, she felt nothing but a crystalline clarity about what needed to happen next. She wasn't going to walk across that stage. The decision came to her not as an emotional breakdown, but as a logical conclusion. She had spent years performing for an audience that wasn't watching. Today, she would stop performing. Maya carefully removed her graduation gown and hung it on her desk chair. She changed into jeans and a sweater, folding the gown with the same precision she brought to everything else. Her valedictorian speech went into the desk drawer, words she'd never speak to parents who'd never hear them. Sitting at her laptop, Maya opened a new document. If her parents were too busy for her graduation, they could make time to read what she had to say. But this wouldn't be an emotional outburst or a desperate plea for attention. This would be documentation. "Dear Mom and Dad," she began, then deleted it. This wasn't a casual family letter. "To Richard and Linda Chen," she started again. "By the time you read this, you will have missed my graduation ceremony. This letter is to explain why I won't be there either, and why I won't be coming home." Maya wrote methodically, drawing on the analytical skills that had made her valedictorian. She documented the pattern of neglect with the same precision she'd used in her engineering projects. The missed award ceremonies with specific dates. The promised family dinners that had been canceled for business calls. The Christmas morning when they'd opened the office for just an hour and returned home to find she'd spent the day alone. She wrote about the financial disparity, how Danny's car, baseball equipment, and tutoring were family investments, while her textbooks and lab fees had come from her part-time job at the campus library. She included the screenshot of today's Instagram post, the evidence of their real priorities. But Maya knew that documentation alone wouldn't be enough. Her parents were skilled at dismissing inconvenient truths, at reframing situations to protect their self-image. She needed witnesses. Maya opened her contact list and began composing individual emails to her extended family, her grandmother, her aunts and uncles, family friends who had always praised her parents' wonderful balance of career and family. She didn't send copies of the letter to everyone, but carefully chose recipients based on their influence and their relationship to her parents. To her grandmother, Nai Nai, who had always been Maya's strongest supporter, the full letter, along with a separate note explaining that this wasn't a teenage tantrum, but a documented pattern of emotional neglect. To her Uncle James, her father's brother who had often commented on Richard's admirable work ethic. A shorter version focusing on the missed opportunities for connection and the disparity in treatment between his children. To her mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, who had daughters of her own. A version that highlighted the gender dynamics she'd observed, the way her achievements were taken for granted, while Danny's mediocrity was celebrated. Maya crafted each message carefully, knowing that her parents' reputation in their community mattered to them in ways that her feelings apparently didn't. She wasn't seeking sympathy, she was creating accountability. The hardest email was to Danny himself. Maya stared at the blank message for several minutes before typing, "I'm sorry you'll hear about this from someone else, but I can't pretend anymore that our family dynamic is normal or healthy. I don't blame you for being the favorite, you didn't choose that role any more than I chose to be invisible. But I'm choosing to stop being invisible now." She attached a copy of the letter and a note explaining that she was taking a job across the country, a position she'd been offered weeks ago but hadn't accepted because she'd been hoping to spend some time at home after graduation. That hope felt foolish now. Maya pulled up the job offer email from Meridian Technologies in Seattle. The position was perfect, a junior engineering role with a focus on sustainable energy systems. Exactly the field she'd been passionate about since that 7th grade science fair project. She'd been hesitant to accept because it meant moving far from family, but now that distance felt like freedom. She composed her acceptance email, professional and enthusiastic, and scheduled it to send in 2 hours, giving herself time to pack and leave before her parents could potentially track her down and try to manipulate her into staying. The final step was the most symbolic. Maya printed her original letter to her parents and placed it on her desk, weighted down with her dorm room key and her unused graduation ticket. Next to it, she placed a photo from her high school graduation, the one where she stood alone because her parents had been at one of Danny's games that day too. Maya packed quickly, efficiently, the way she'd learned to do everything, without expecting help, without emotional support, without fanfare. 2 suitcases held everything that mattered to her. The rest could be shipped later or donated. As she carried her bags to her car, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in years: anticipation for her own future, rather than anxiety about meeting others' expectations. She was done seeking validation from people who had never learned to value her properly. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate. "Can't wait to see you up there. Save me a seat at the family lunch after." Maya typed back, "Change of plans. Something came up. Have an amazing day." It wasn't a lie, exactly. Something had come up, her self-respect. Maya started her car and began the drive toward her new life, leaving behind the campus where she'd spent 4 years excelling for parents who had never bothered to witness her excellence. The ceremony would start in an hour, her parents would receive the letter and by tomorrow Maya would be 3 states away, finally free to build a life where her achievements mattered to the people around her. For the first time in her adult life, Maya was making a choice based on what she needed rather than what others expected. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Richard Chen's phone rang as he climbed into his Mercedes after Danny's game. The boy had struck out twice, but Linda was already planning a celebration dinner. "Great hustle out there, champ," Richard had said, the same encouragement he'd been offering for mediocre performances since Danny was 8. "Richard, it's Nai." His mother-in-law's voice was sharp, a tone he'd heard only a handful of times in 25 years of marriage. "We need to talk now. Good evening, Nai. Is everything? Did you go to Maya's graduation today?" Richard felt his stomach drop. In the excitement of Danny's game, he'd completely forgotten to follow up on Maya's ceremony. "Well, we had a business emergency and Maya understands. Richard Chen, you stop talking right now and listen to me." Nai's voice cut through his explanation like a blade. "I just received an email from my granddaughter. She's gone. She left school, she's moving across the country, and she's done with all of us. And after reading what she wrote, I understand why." The drive home was silent. Linda sat in the passenger seat, her phone buzzing constantly with calls from her sister Patricia, her cousin Helen, family friends they hadn't heard from in months. Richard's phone was equally busy, his brother James, his business partner Marcus, even their neighbor Miss Kim had somehow gotten involved. "This is ridiculous," Linda muttered, declining another call. "Maya's always been dramatic. Remember when she was 16 and threatened to skip family vacation because we couldn't reschedule around her science camp?" "You mean the science camp where she won a national award?" Richard asked quietly, a memory surfacing that he'd successfully buried for years. When they arrived home, the house felt different. Richard couldn't put his finger on it until he realized what was missing. The ambient stress of Maya's perfectionism, the quiet intensity of someone who worked twice as hard as everyone else just to be noticed half as much. The letter was waiting on the kitchen counter, along with Maya's house key and a printed copy of her valedictorian speech. Richard read the speech first, his chest tightening with each paragraph. Maya had written about perseverance, about family support, about the people who believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself. She'd planned to thank them publicly for sacrifices they'd never made. Linda read the letter aloud, her voice growing smaller with each documented incident. The science fair they'd missed for a client dinner that had netted them $12,000, barely a significant deal in their current portfolio. The scholarship ceremony they'd skipped for a property showing that had fallen through anyway. The NASA internship celebration where Maya had stood alone while other families took pictures. "She's being manipulative," Linda said when she finished, but her voice lacked conviction. "She's trying to make us feel guilty." Richard's phone rang. James, his brother, who never called unless someone was dying. "What the hell is wrong with you?" James's voice carried across the kitchen even though the phone wasn't on speaker. "Maya sent me an email. Your daughter, the one who just became valedictorian while you were watching Danny play baseball. Do you have any idea how this looks?" "James, you don't understand the full situation. I understand enough. I understand that at Danny's 8th grade graduation 3 years ago, you left work early and closed the office. But for Maya's college graduation, from MIT, Richard, from MIT, you couldn't be bothered to show up." Richard had forgotten about that. He'd been so proud of Danny for graduating 8th grade with a B+ average that they'd thrown a family party. Maya had gotten into MIT that same month, and they'd taken her out for a congratulatory dinner at Applebee's. The calls continued throughout the evening. Nai arrived unannounced at 9 p.m., carrying printouts of emails, and a fury that Linda had never seen in her typically gentle mother. "Sit down," Nai commanded, spreading Maya's documentation across their dining room table like evidence in a trial. "Look at this. Look at what you've done to that child." The emails Maya had sent to family members weren't identical, Richard realized. She'd tailored each one to the recipient, highlighting specific aspects of the neglect that would resonate with each person. To James, she'd focused on the professional parallels, how Richard would never treat a business partner's achievements with such casual dismissal. To Patricia, she'd written about the subtle sexism, how her accomplishments were expected while Danny's were celebrated. She's turned the whole family against us, Linda said after Nai left. This is emotional manipulation. But Richard was beginning to see the pattern Maya had documented. The birthday parties where they'd hired photographers for Danny's friends, but forgotten to take pictures at Maya's smaller gatherings. The parent-teacher conferences they'd attended religiously for Danny's struggles but skipped entirely for Maya's triumph. The way they'd described Maya to others, independent, self-sufficient, needing nothing, while describing Danny as sensitive, needing support, requiring their constant attention. At midnight, Danny came home from his post-game celebration with friends. He'd been riding high on the attention, the family dinner, the promises of summer baseball camp, but his mood shifted when he saw his parents at the kitchen table, surrounded by Maya's letter and printed emails. "What's going on?" he asked, and Richard realized that Danny genuinely didn't know. They'd protected him so completely from any family conflict that he was unaware of the dynamics Maya had been living with for years. Linda handed him the letter. Richard watched his son's face change as he read, confusion, then recognition, then something that looked like shame. "I didn't know," Danny said quietly. "I mean, I knew Maya was smart and didn't need help with stuff, but I didn't know." He trailed off, then looked up at his parents. "Did you really miss her graduation for my game?" "It was just a regular season game. We play twice a week." "Your games are important to us," Linda said defensively. "More important than Maya's graduation." Danny's voice cracked slightly. "Mom, she's valedictorian. Do you know how hard that is? I can barely pass algebra, and she's like a genius, and you missed her graduation." Richard felt something cold settle in his stomach. If even Danny could see the problem, how had they been blind to it for so long? "She's being manipulative," Linda repeated, but she was crying now. "She's trying to punish us. Maybe we deserve to be punished," Richard said quietly. The next morning brought more consequences. Their neighbor Mrs. Kim stopped by with a casserole and a pointed conversation about family priorities. The real estate office buzzed with whispers. Maya's story had somehow reached their professional community. Marcus, Richard's business partner, pulled him aside with uncomfortable questions about work-life balance and family reputation. But the worst part was Danny's change in behavior. The golden boy who had always basked in their attention now seemed uncomfortable with it. When Linda suggested celebrating his good grade on a history test, Danny shook his head. "Maya got A's all the time and you never made a big deal about it," he said. "Maybe we shouldn't make a big deal about this either." Richard tried calling Maya, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Her email bounced back with an auto reply. "This email address is no longer active." She had methodically cut off every avenue of communication, the same way she'd methodically documented their neglect. "She'll come back," Linda said on the third day, but her confidence was wavering. "She's just trying to scare us. She needs us." But Richard was beginning to understand that Maya had never needed them. She'd wanted them, and they'd mistaken her independence for indifference, her strength for invulnerability, her quiet achievements for lack of need. Maya had spent years being the perfect, undemanding daughter. Now she was being the perfect, undemanding absence. And somehow that was more devastating than any tantrum or emotional confrontation could have been. 3 months of silence had passed when Richard and Linda Chen stepped off the plane in Seattle. They'd hired a private investigator to find Maya, a decision that had sparked their first real fight in years. Linda had wanted to respect Maya's boundaries. Richard had insisted they needed to fix this situation before it destroyed their family's reputation permanently. The investigator had been thorough. Maya worked at Meridian Technologies in their sustainable energy division. She lived in a modest apartment in Capitol Hill. She'd been promoted already, just 12 weeks into the job. She had no social media presence under her real name, but neighbors described her as friendly, professional, someone who received packages for the elderly woman next door and always said hello. "She's building a whole life without us," Linda had said when they received the report. It was the first time Richard had seen his wife look genuinely afraid. They hadn't called ahead. Linda had argued for warning Maya they were coming, but Richard had overruled her. "She won't see us if we ask," he'd said. "We need to make her listen." Meridian Technologies occupied 3 floors of a sleek building in South Lake Union. The receptionist, a young man with kind eyes, looked uncomfortable when Richard announced they were there to see Maya Chen. "Is she expecting you?" he asked. "We're her parents," Linda said, as if that explained everything. The receptionist made a quiet phone call, then returned with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry, but Miss Chen is in a meeting. She asked if you could schedule an appointment through her supervisor. We'll wait, Richard said firmly. They sat in the lobby for 2 hours. Richard watched employees come and go, noting the casual dress code, the collaborative energy, the way people seemed genuinely happy to be there. At 5:30, Maya emerged from the elevator with a group of colleagues, laughing at something one of them had said. Richard's breath caught. His daughter looked different, not just older but lighter somehow. Her hair was shorter, her clothes more colorful. She moved with a confidence he'd never noticed before, or maybe had never been allowed to develop at home. Maya saw them and stopped mid-laugh. Her face didn't show anger or hurt, just a weary resignation that was somehow worse than either emotion would have been. Mom, Dad, she turned to her colleagues, I'll catch up with you tomorrow. They walked to a nearby coffee shop in silence. Maya ordered a lavender latte, something Richard had never seen her drink before. How many small preferences had they never bothered to learn? You look good, Linda said, reaching across the table, as if to touch Maya's hand. Maya pulled back slightly, not dramatically, just enough to avoid contact. Thank you, Maya said politely. How did you find me? We hired someone, Richard admitted. Maya, this has gone on long enough. You've made your point. Have I? Maya's voice was calm, professional. What point do you think I was making? That you're angry we missed your graduation, Linda said. And you have every right to be upset. We're sorry, we want to make it up to you. Maya stirred her latte slowly. We want you to come home for Danny's birthday next month, Richard said. The whole family will be there. We can celebrate your graduation then, properly. We'll invite everyone, make a big celebration. Danny's birthday, Maya repeated. Yes, and yours too, Linda added quickly. We can combine them, make it a family celebration. Maya set down her spoon. My birthday was 6 weeks ago. The silence stretched between them. Richard felt something crumble in his chest. They'd missed Maya's birthday, again. He couldn't even remember the last time they'd remembered it without Maya reminding them first. We've been distracted, Linda said weakly. With everything that's been happening, Maya echoed. You mean the consequences of your choices finally catching up with you? Maya, don't be cruel, Richard said. We're here because we love you. Are you? Maya's composure cracked slightly. Or are you here because Nai stopped speaking to you? Because Uncle James brought up my letter at the family barbecue? Because your business partners are asking uncomfortable questions about your family values? Richard felt heat rise in his chest. You had no right to involve other people in our family business. Family business? Maya's voice rose for the first time. What family business? For 22 years, you've made it clear that I'm not part of the family business. Danny is the heir apparent. I'm the side project who was supposed to succeed quietly and not bother anyone. That's not true, Linda protested. You're our daughter, of course you're part of the family. When? Maya asked. When was I part of the family? When you missed my science fair to take Danny to Chuck E. Cheese. When you hired a professional photographer for his middle school graduation, but forgot to take pictures at my high school graduation. When you spent spring break looking at colleges with him but told me to handle my own applications, because I was so capable. You were capable, Richard said. You are capable. You got into MIT on your own. You didn't need our help. I didn't need your help. Or I wasn't worth your help. Maya's composure was dissolving. Do you know what I needed? I needed you to be proud of me. I needed you to show up. I needed you to care about my achievements as much as you cared about Danny's participation trophies. We are proud of you, Linda said, tears in her eyes. We've always been proud. Then why did you miss my graduation for a baseball game? Maya's voice broke. A regular season game. Danny plays twice a week. I graduate once, ever, and you chose his routine over my milestone. Richard reached for his daughter's hand. Maya, we made a mistake. We're here to fix it. Maya pulled her hand away. No, you're here to manage. You're here because your reputation is suffering, and you need me to stop making you look bad. You want me to come to Danny's birthday party, so you can parade me around and prove you're good parents after all. That's not, Linda began. It is, Maya interrupted, because if you actually cared about fixing our relationship, You would have started with an apology that didn't include conditions. You would have acknowledged the pattern of neglect without trying to justify it. You would have asked what I needed instead of telling me what you're willing to offer. Richard felt his patience wearing thin. Maya, you're being unreasonable. We're offering to celebrate your graduation. We're offering to include you in Danny's party. What more do you want? I want you to understand that I don't want to be included in Danny's party, Maya said, her voice steady again. I want my own celebration. I want my own attention. I want my own parents who show up for my events without needing to be bribed or guilted into it. You're asking us to choose between our children, Linda said. No, Maya replied. I'm asking you to love both your children, but you can't do that, can you? You have Danny who needs you, and Maya who doesn't. Except Maya did need you. She just got really good at hiding it. Richard felt cornered, defensive. Fine, you want us to grovel? You want us to admit we're terrible parents? Will that make you happy? I want you to mean it when you apologize. Maya said quietly, I want you to understand what you did wrong instead of just being sorry you got caught. And I want you to prove you've changed before I risk getting hurt again. We're your parents, Richard said. You don't get to give us conditions. Maya stood up. Actually, I do. I'm an adult with my own life now. You can have a relationship with me on terms that are healthy for both of us. Or you can have no relationship with me at all. But you can't have the old relationship where I accept scraps of attention and pretend I'm grateful for them. You're being manipulative, Linda said, desperation creeping into her voice. You're trying to control us. I'm trying to protect myself. Maya replied, for the first time in my life I'm putting my own emotional needs first. If that feels like manipulation to you, maybe you should ask yourself why. Richard stood as well, his voice rising. Maya, enough. You're our daughter, and you're going to start acting like it. We're cutting off your credit cards, your phone plan, your car insurance. If you want to be independent, you can be fully independent. Maya stared at him for a long moment, then started laughing. It wasn't a happy sound. Dad, I've been paying for all of those things myself since I was 18. You have no financial leverage over me because you never financially supported me. Just like you have no emotional leverage over me because you never emotionally supported me either. She picked up her purse. I hope someday you'll understand what you lost when you chose to love conditional. But I can't wait around hoping anymore. I have a life to build, and for the first time it's a life where I matter to the people in it. Maya walked away, leaving her parents sitting in a Seattle coffee shop, finally understanding that their daughter had meant every word in her letter. She wasn't coming back, and unlike every other problem in their lives, this one couldn't be solved with money, influence, or the expectation that others would bend to their will. 1 year later, Maya stood at the podium of the Pacific Northwest Renewable Energy Conference, looking out at an audience of 300 industry professionals. The keynote speech she'd just delivered on sustainable grid integration had earned a standing ovation, and now she fielded questions with the same quiet confidence she'd once reserved for academic presentations to empty auditoriums. Chen, called a voice from the back, your innovative approach to energy storage seems to build on theoretical work from your undergraduate thesis. How did you develop that foundation? Maya smiled. I was fortunate to have mentors who encouraged me to pursue ambitious projects, even when the practical applications weren't immediately obvious. Sometimes the best support is someone believing in your potential before you can see it yourself. After the session, Maya's colleagues surrounded her with congratulations. Dr. Sarah Kim, her supervisor, had become more than a boss. She was the kind of mentor Maya had always wished for. Someone who celebrated her successes as enthusiastically as she helped navigate challenges. Drinks to celebrate, suggested Marcus, a fellow engineer who'd become one of her closest friends. That speech was incredible. Rain check, Maya said. I have a family dinner tonight. The word family felt different now. Maya had built her chosen family carefully over the past year, colleagues who valued her contributions, friends who remembered her birthday, neighbors who checked on her during the week she'd had flu. Mrs. Patterson from next door had become an unofficial grandmother, teaching Maya to knit while sharing stories of her own estrangement from difficult relatives. Maya's phone buzzed as she walked to her car. A text from Danny, saw the conference live stream. You were amazing. Still on for coffee Sunday. The relationship with her brother had been the most surprising development of the year. 3 months after the Seattle confrontation, Danny had reached out through a mutual family friend, asking if he could visit. The conversation had been awkward at first, Years of different treatment had created different people, but they'd found common ground in their shared experience of their parents' limitations. Danny was in therapy now, working through his own issues with the pressure of being the golden child. I never realized how suffocating it was, he'd told her during one of their monthly video calls. Every accomplishment felt hollow because I knew it wasn't really earned, and every failure felt catastrophic because I was supposed to be perfect. He'd made genuine changes too. When their parents had tried to plan another elaborate celebration for his mediocre SAT scores, Danny had declined. Maya got a full scholarship to MIT, and you took her to Applebee's, he'd said. Maybe we should tone down the celebrations until they match the achievements. Maya had been proud of him for that moment of clarity, though she knew it had come at a cost. Their parents had been confused and hurt by Danny's sudden boundaries, unable to understand why their affection was being rejected. The updates about her parents came through Danny, and occasionally through Nai, who had maintained a relationship with Maya while keeping her own boundaries with Richard and Linda. Her grandmother's loyalty had been unwavering. She'd skipped Danny's birthday party when it became clear it was being positioned as a replacement celebration for Maya's missed graduation. According to Danny, their parents had gone through stages of grief over the past year. Denial had lasted for months, with Linda insisting Maya would get over it and come home once she realized how good she had it. Anger had followed, with Richard telling anyone who would listen that Maya was manipulative and ungrateful. The bargaining phase had been painful to watch secondhand. They'd sent expensive gifts to Maya's office, jewelry, electronics, items that showed they still didn't know her preferences. Maya had donated them all to a local women's shelter, keeping only a card that Linda had written by hand. It was the first personal note her mother had ever sent her, though it was still focused more on their pain than on understanding Maya's. Depression had set in around the 6-month mark when they'd realized that their social circle's sympathy was limited. Friends and extended family had initially rallied around the idea that Maya was going through a phase, but as time passed and Maya's absence became permanent, the narrative had shifted. People began asking uncomfortable questions about how a valedictorian daughter becomes so estranged from her family. Now Danny reported, they seemed to be settling into a version of acceptance, though it was more resignation than genuine understanding. They'd stopped trying to contact Maya directly, stopped sending gifts, stopped making elaborate plans to win her back. But they also hadn't done the deeper work of examining their behavior or making changes to how they approached relationships. They talk about you like you died, Danny had told her recently. Not in a dramatic way, just like you're gone and they don't understand why, but they're not going to keep fighting it. Maya found that strangely peaceful. She'd grieved the parents she'd wanted but never had, and now she could appreciate the parents they were, flawed people who loved imperfectly, but weren't capable of the kind of love she needed. The difference was that she no longer needed them to change in order for her to be happy. As Maya drove home through Seattle's evening traffic, she reflected on the ways her life had exceeded even her own expectations. The job at Meridian had led to rapid promotions and increasing responsibility. She'd published 2 papers in respected journals, been invited to speak at conferences across the country, and was being courted by a startup that wanted her to lead their research division. More importantly, she'd learned to advocate for herself in ways that went beyond academic or professional achievement. She'd negotiated for the salary she deserved, spoken up when colleagues took credit for her ideas, and built relationships based on mutual respect rather than her ability to be useful without being burdensome. Maya's apartment building came into view, and she felt the familiar warmth of coming home to a space that was entirely hers. She'd decorated it with colors she loved, filled it with books that interested her, created a sanctuary that reflected her personality rather than someone else's expectations. Her phone rang as she parked. Dr. Kim's name appeared on the screen. Maya, I hope you don't mind the late call, but I wanted to discuss an opportunity with you. Of course, what's up? The Department of Energy called this afternoon. They're creating a new task force on renewable energy integration, and they specifically requested you. It would mean relocating to Washington, D.C. for 2 years, leading a team of 15 engineers, and having direct input on national energy policy. Maya felt her heart race. 2 years ago she would have immediately worried about whether she was qualified, whether she deserved such an opportunity, whether accepting it would somehow prove she was selfish, or ambitious in ways that made her difficult to love. Now her first thought was excitement. That sounds incredible, she said. When do they need an answer? Take the weekend to think about it. But Maya, I want you to know, I've never seen someone make such an impact so quickly. You have a gift for bringing out the best in people while pushing for excellence. The department is lucky to get you. After they hung up, Maya sat in her car for a moment, processing the opportunity. A year ago she'd been preparing for a graduation ceremony, where she would thank her parents for support they'd never given. Now she was being recruited by the federal government to shape energy policy for the country. The irony wasn't lost on her. All those years of seeking her parents' validation, and the validation that mattered most had come from people who barely knew her family existed. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Saw the news about the DOE opportunity. You're going to change the world. Another text from Mrs. Patterson. Proud of you, dear. Dinner Sunday. And finally, one from Danny. Whatever you decide about DC, I'm proud to be your brother. Maya smiled, pocketing her phone and heading toward her building. Tomorrow she'd call the Department of Energy and accept their offer. She'd pack up her Seattle life and move across the country again, this time not running from something, but running toward something extraordinary. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Maya realized she'd stopped waiting for her parents to be proud of her achievements. She'd started being proud of them herself, and somehow that had made all the difference. The last time she'd walked across a stage, it had been to accept an award at the Renewable Energy Conference. The audience had been full of people who were there by choice, who understood the significance of her work, who celebrated her success without reservation. It was everything she'd wanted her graduation to be and more. Maya unlocked her door and stepped into her carefully curated life, one where her accomplishments mattered to the people around her, where her presence was valued rather than tolerated, and where love came without conditions or competition. It was exactly the life she'd started building the day she walked away from her graduation ceremony, and for the first time in her 23 years, Maya Chen felt truly proud of who she'd become.